Hey everybody, welcome back. This is Sean. Happy to have you. Today we're going to be talking about chapter 1051 of One Piece. I actually really enjoyed this chapter. It was pretty much what I expected, but there were some really heartfelt and funny moments that actually made the chapter really, really enjoyable to read. Not to say that the last couple of chapters were bad because they weren't, but this one definitely was sort of a step up or a step in the right direction if you ask me. So starting things off with the cover story, we of course have Germa. They have officially successfully escaped. They haven't left Whole Cake Island yet, but the two that were imprisoned in the book are now out. I wasn't really too interested in this cover story to begin with once it was revealed that the two people coming to save Yonji and I believe it was Niji were just their siblings. I sort of lost interest in the cover story. This particular cover was even less interesting because nothing really happens. They just show the four of them walking away from the burning prison room like a couple of 80s movies, badasses. So not really too much happens there. Getting into the chapter, we pick things up in the Flower Capital right where we left off. Where the citizens have sort of calmed down and now realize that Momonosuke is not Kaido. So at this moment, the rest of the scabbards start to step through the smoke cloud. Hiyori also comes through, and a lot of the citizens are getting really, really happy and kind of confused as well. They're like, "Oh my God, Kinemon, we thought you were dead," but they are happy, and a lot of them are starting to realize, like, it's starting to click for them that this means Lady Toki's prophecy was true. So once this happens, some of the Wano residents go to grab some of the broadcast snails that they were using to show what was going on in the Flower Capital for the festival all throughout the country. And they begin to use this to broadcast the scabbards, the reveal of the scabbards to all the rest of Wano, and what we see later on also to Onigashima, because there was apparently a screen on Onigashima as well that was showing the broadcast from the Flower Capital. One thing I thought was kind of interesting about that, I maybe just never noticed it before, but the citizens of Wano are aware of the Denden Mushi. They use them all the time, but they call them scroll snails, which is just a little bit different, and it's actually just like their relationship with devil fruits, right? They're aware of the existence of devil fruits. Plenty of people in Wano have them, not just the smiles, but like actual devil fruits. But they don't call them devil fruits. They usually call them something else or some other type of power, which is pretty interesting. But it also makes sense because they're an isolated nation, so they're not going to use the same terms to describe the same things as everybody else. From here, we jump back to Onigashima, where we see just outside of the Skull Dome, some of the Straw Hats, well, all the rest of the Straw Hats have come back together, and they're with Yamato. And this interaction is actually pretty hilarious. So Yamato, who is a woman, by the way, introduces herself as Kaido's son. This shocks pretty much everyone, but it makes Brook and Sanji a very special kind of confused. They're like looking like, wait, why is this guy so hot, right? So they're both kind of just like, we don't know how we feel about this, right? So Yamato explains that she isn't actually their enemy. She states that she's actually been following their adventure for a long time through the newspapers. And this also kind of struck me because I guess I just never really paid attention to it. I don't know if they mentioned it or not, but Kaido still manages to get newspapers on Onigashima, even though the rest of Wano just doesn't, with them being isolated. So I thought that was kind of interesting. I don't know exactly how that works, if the news crews literally just drop the paper off at Onigashima and then just fly over the rest of Wano, or if Kaido has somebody get papers and bring them to him. I don't know. We'll see. Yamato then goes on to formally introduce herself, which is also pretty hilarious. She says, "I'll be sailing with you guys from now on. I go by Kozuki Oden, but you can just call me Yamato." And with this, everyone is just like floored. Like, they're all super confused. Meanwhile, Robin and Jinbei have like the two best reactions out of everybody. They're pretty funny. So after Yamato says this, Robin just kind of gives a little laugh, and of course, like, Sanji and Brook are like over the moon because they're like, yay, another woman who says she's a man, but who knows, who cares? Like, she's hot, he's hot, whatever. But Robin just kind of gives a little laugh, and she smiles and says, "Oh, how amusing." I thought this was really interesting because if you remember, Robin actually joined the crew in a pretty similar fashion, right? She just kind of popped up and was like, "Hey, I'm Robin and I'm a Straw Hat now," and everyone was just like, "What?" And of course Sanji was like, hell yeah, you're a Straw Hat now. What do you like to eat? I'll go make it right now. The difference between that situation and now is that now Luffy and Zoro are still unconscious. So that sort of voice of reason role falls to Jinbei, who very smartly and calmly says, you know, I'm gonna need to hear this from the captain before I'm convinced, right? We'll need confirmation from the captain before this is official. And Yamato, of course, she agrees, right? She's like, that's fair. After this, we get some pretty interesting clarification on Tama's devil fruit. As some of the beast pirates are trying to flee the scene, Yamato tells them to stop, like, where are you going? And one of them turns around and yells back, like, young master, we don't want to be servants like those other guys, talking about the gifters who are still under Otama's control. This prompts Usopp to ask, like, yeah, what's going to happen to these guys? And Tama explains that in a very funny way, because she's a kid, so she doesn't fully understand it. She explains that her power wears off when the moon shape comes back around, which of course we know means in a month. So Usopp was like, so you mean in a month? So essentially what Tama says is that her power wears off after a month, but at that point the animals can do whatever they want. They can leave, but some of them choose to stay. I'm assuming this is what happened with Komichio, because as we see later from a small Tama flashback, Komichio has actually been with her for a very long time. So if she did use the dango on him to get him to, be so loyal, it's worn off a long time ago. So around this time, the broadcast from the Flower Capital finally reaches Onigashima, and all the Straw Hats and everybody look up to see, what's going on. This is when we cut back to the Flower Capital and we actually see the silhouette of adult Momo start to come through the smoke cloud. He's giving a speech about how, the Flower Capital, or the Flower Festival, doesn't have to be the last night of happiness for all the people. After tonight, you can drink as much as you want, laugh, party, do as much as you want to your heart's content, because Kaido and Orochi have been defeated. And everybody's just kind of like, whoa, like, what is going on? And Tama actually starts to cry, and this is when we get that little flashback of her life. We see how her parents were sent to go work in the factories and they died, and she was pretty much living on her own on the street, and she was selling the woven hats to survive. And it's at this point that Tenguyama actually found her, and he decided that he was going to raise her. One thing that was kind of interesting, it was that it occurs to me that Tengu is probably pretty well known throughout Wano, because Otama recognizes him immediately, probably because of the mask, but it shows that even a kid like Otama knows who Tenguyama is, even though she's, like I said, she's a child. She has no idea about swords or, samurai or sword masters or anything like that. So the fact that she knows who Tenguyama is without him even introducing himself, just by his face, shows that Tenguyama is probably pretty well known throughout Wano still. So at this point, during the sort of climax of the speech, this is when we finally get the reveal of adult Momonosuke. And I gotta say, I love his character design. Like, it's really, really cool. He looks, as most people expected, just like his dad, but he still looks like himself. He's not an Odin clone or anything like that, right? He has sort of Odin's eyes and his eyebrows, but the rest of his face still looks like Momonosuke. He has long hair. Instead of his hair being up and like a top knot like his dad's, or like even his was previously, he has long hair that goes pretty much all the way down his back, sort of similar to Tenguyama. And he's wearing this really cool robe. It's similar obviously to the one that he wore as a kid, but it's just bigger and it fits him now. And he has Ame no Habikiri with him on his hip. He finishes his speech, he takes the sword and he raises it up into the air, and pretty much everybody like in the country starts cheering and crying. And it's at this point that Hiyori comes over and gives him a hug. We see Tama give Nami a hug, and everybody's super happy and just over the moon. And all the Scabbards and Momo and Hiyori, they all turn around and start walking into the castle. And this is where the chapter actually ends. So this was really just a feel-good chapter, right? Like, this was the typical wrap-up that we get from a lot of these arcs, where the Straw Hats defeat, the main antagonist and the person who they helped, because they pretty much always help somebody in the process of doing this, gets to, sort of relish in that newfound freedom and happiness that comes from not having this person looming over them anymore, right? Or people in this case, with it being Orochi and Kaido. So I really enjoyed the chapter. Like I said, there were some moments that made me like legit laugh. There were some moments that were really heartfelt and poignant, and you know, it was the wrap up that we get most of the time, and we love it so much that it's just like you can't really, you can't hate a chapter like this. I'm sure some people are still gonna nitpick and find a reason to not like it, but for me it was really good. And I think total I would probably give it like an 8 out of 10. One thing that sort of lowered the score for it for me was because we never got, or we still haven't gotten, any sort of explanation or exposition on what's going on with the island itself, as far as the crackling and that sort of earthquake that happened when Kaido and Big Mom fell into the core of the island and the waterfall started to crumble apart. There was no mention of that in this chapter whatsoever. So I guess that's going to be pushed to next chapter. We still don't know about Wano's fate, sort of Momo's decision to not open the borders, how the waterfall falling is going to affect that decision, if he's going to change his mind, if maybe something's going to happen when Luffy wakes up that causes him to change his mind, if they're maybe going to argue or even fight about this decision a little bit, sort of similar to what we saw with Rebecca back in Dressrosa, when Luffy came to essentially kidnap her, to take her to go talk to Soldier, her father. So I don't know where it's gonna go from here, but I'm assuming and hoping that we get some more information on that in the next chapter. But like I said, I really enjoyed this chapter. I would say solid 7 or 8 out of 10 for me. Let me know what you guys thought down in the comments. If you like this video, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe to see more. You can follow me on my social media on Instagram and Twitter. I'll leave the links down in the description below, and see you later, guys. Peace.